everyone, it's Jennifer from Flux. Welcome to week 2 of the 2023 Flux Spring Crochet Along. We are working on the Wisteria Trellis Throw. This is a lovely springtime blanket, kind of a soft muted palette, and it's very squishy and just feels really nice. It's just a really nice throw to have around. We are going to be today learning how to do the granny square portion. This is a join as you go, in case you missed week 1 last week. This is a join as you go kind of classic granny square blanket. So last week we talked about the project itself, the kind of like the introduction and the supplies needed. So if you missed that, you can go down below and grab the link to that if you want to catch up. This week, like I said, we're going to be learning how to make the granny square stitch by stitch and step by step. We're actually going to be making this one today. We're going to start at this upper corner and kind of work our way out. So looking ahead, next week we're going to learn how to start connecting our squares. So we have one square that we'll be starting with, and next week we're going to be adding more squares on using the join as you go technique. That's a really easy way to do it. I'm going to walk you through that stitch by stitch as well. The following week, week 4, we're going to be doing some work with our border. So once we have our squares all connected and crocheted up, we're going to learn how to make a complementary kind of border. This is the same granny stitch as our squares, so it mimics it both in the color palette that I've chosen and the stitches. So we're going to learn how to do a very easy granny border that will just kind of finish off your blanket and make it look nice and neat and finished and like frame it all in. And we'll learn how to do some finish work, weaving in ends and things like that. For week 5, the last week of our crochet along, we're going to be doing a recap. So what I do is I take all the video parts and all the written piece, all the blog posts, all the videos, and I put them into one handy post over at the Flux blog. And that way, I know a lot of you like to revisit these projects and make other ones and make multiple projects, and it'll be all in one handy post. I know a lot of you like when I do that. So week 5, the last week of our crochet along, we'll just kind of have a recap, and we'll have more pictures of the finished piece, etc. So let's jump in for today's tutorial, and we're going to learn how to make our first square, our granny square of our project. We're going to begin our first tutorial today by working our first granny square this week. So very easy this week, and we're just going to make the first one in its entirety. So you make the very first one, and then when you make the other squares, you join them onto that first one, okay? So what we're going to do is, to begin, let me zoom way in so you can see here. And what we're going to do is put a slip knot on our hook first. So leave yourself a little bit of a tail. Wrap the yarn around your fingers to make a loop. Bring the yarn behind the loop, reach in with your hook, bring up a loop, and tighten. Then what we're going to do is chain 4. To make a chain, wrap the yarn around the hook and bring it through the loop. That's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we're going to join in the farthest chain from our hook with a slip stitch to create a ring. So insert the hook into that chain farthest from the hook, bring up a loop, now bring that loop through the loop already on your hook, and now we have a ring. We're also going to hold this tail along the edge as we work because that will weave it in as we go along, and it'll save us a little bit of an extra step. As in like a side note, you can also do the magic ring if you prefer that instead of this starting chain type ring, okay? Okay, so to begin round 1, we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. This counts as our first double crochet of the round, and then we're going to work 2 more double crochets into the center of the ring. To make a double crochet, wrap the yarn around the hook, insert the hook into the center of the ring, and bring up a loop. Wrap yarn around the hook, bring it through the first 2 loops, wrap yarn around hook, bring it through the last 2 loops. Still holding this tail along the edge as we work. Work a second double crochet into the center of that ring. And then we're going to chain 2. This is going to create our first corner, 1 and 2. And then we're going to work 3 double crochet into the center of the ring. So 1, 2, and 3. Once again, chain 2. We're going to create another corner of our square. And you can push your stitches over if you need to make yourself some more space in that ring. Then we're going to work 3 double crochets into the center of the ring once again. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 2, 1, 2. I'm still holding this tail along the edge. And then we're going to work 3 more double crochets into the center of the ring. So 1, pushing things over if needed, 2, and 3. Once again, chain 2 to create that last corner, and then go back to this chain 3 we did at the beginning of the round, and we're going to join with a slip stitch to close the round. So go 1, 2, and 3, insert the hook into that chain, that topmost chain, bring up a loop, now bring that loop through the loop already on your hook, and row 1 is completed. And it sort of is starting to maybe look like a little square, a little rounded, but it'll look more like a square as we go along. Okay, so for round 2, we're gonna continue with our color because we're doing a solid color granny square. But our hook is not quite in the right place here. So what we need to do is slip stitch over to that first corner space, okay? So go into the next stitch that you see, insert the hook, bring up a loop, bring that loop through the loop already on your hook. Go into the next stitch that you see, bring up a loop, bring that loop through the loop already on your hook. And now we're in the right spot to begin round 2. So for round 2, what we're going to do is once again chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. Work 2 double crochets into that corner space, that chain 2 space from the previous round. So 1 and 2, and then we're going to create a corner. So chain 2 once again, and in that same chain 2 space, work 3 double crochet. So 1, 2, and 3. And as you can see, we now have a little corner of our square, okay? So now we're going to create, we're kind of working up the side of our square now. So now we're going to chain 1. So for our sides in between these groupings, we do a chain 1. For the corners, to establish the corners, we do a chain 2. Just because there's more stitches going in there, we need a little bit more space. Okay? Now hop over to that next chain 2 space and work 3 double crochet. 1, 2, 3. Chain 2. 1 and 2, and then work 3 more double crochets into that corner space. So 1, 2, and 3. Then chain 1, because we're coming down the side, go to that next corner space and do the same thing. 3 double crochet, 1, 2, 3. Chain 2, because we're creating a corner, and in that same chain 2 space, work 3 more double crochet. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1, hop over to that next corner space that you see, and do the same thing. 3 double crochet, 1, 2, 3, chain 2, because we're creating a corner, and 3 more double crochet. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1, and now go to that chain 3 from the beginning of the round and insert your hook into that topmost chain and work a slip stitch. Bring up a loop, bring that loop through the loop already on your hook. And now round 2 is complete. You can see our lovely little square is taking shape, okay? So next what we're going to do is we're going to slip stitch over once again to that first corner space that we see. So slip stitch into the next stitch, slip stitch into the next stitch, and now we're at the corner again. So for round 3, what we'll do is very similar to round 2, except for we're going to be adding some side stitches this time. So chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Again, this counts as the first double crochet of the round. And in that same corner space, work 2 double crochet. 1 and 2. My yarn label is scooting across the table there. Okay, Then we're going to create that corner, chain 2, and then push things over if you need to, and work 3 double crochet into that same corner space. 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to chain 1, and now we have a side space. So in the side space, what we're going to do is work 3 double crochet into that side space. So 1, 2, and 3, and then chain 1. Then we're going to hop over to that next corner space, and we're going to work 3 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, and then we want to create that corner, so chain 2, 1 and 2. So 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1, and now we're going to come up the side here and work 3 double crochet into this side space. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1. Now hop to that corner space and do the same thing we've been doing. You'll always work your corners the same way. So 3 double crochet, 1, 2, 3, chain 2, and 3 double crochet. 1, 2, and 3. All right, chain 1. Now we're going to work that side. So 3 double crochet, 1, 2, 3, chain 1. Now we're at a corner again, so 3 double crochet. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 2 because we're creating a corner, and 3 double crochet. 1, 2, and 3. All right, coming up this last side here, we're going to chain 1 and then work 3 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, chain 1, and then join to close. So count that third chain up, 1, 2, 3, and join to close with a slip stitch. Insert the hook into that third chain up, bring up a loop. Now bring that loop through the loop already on your hook. Okay, our square, now we can kind of straighten things out. I like to sharpen up the corners. It's looking great. So what we want to do now is move on to round 4. Round 4 is going to be the last round for this square because we're going to make a bunch of squares and join them all together, okay? So again, our hook isn't quite in the right place, so we need to slip stitch over. So slip stitch into that first stitch, slip stitch into the next stitch, slip stitch into the next stitch, and now we're at the right spot at that corner space, okay? So we're going to start this round almost exactly the same way, except for this round, we have 2 side spaces to work into this time. So once again, chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and this counts as a double crochet once again. Now work 2 double crochets into that corner space. 1 and 2, chain 2. 1, 2, and then 3 double crochets into that corner space, that same corner space. So 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1. All right, now this next space here on the side, work 3 double crochet. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1, and now we have a second corner space this time to work into. So once again, 3 double crochet. 1, 2, and 3, chain 1. Go into that corner space and work 3 double crochet. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 2 because it's a corner. 1, 2. I like to do a chain 2. I think I mentioned this before. I like to do the chain 2 in the corner because it gives us a little bit more space to work our stitches into. Also, as a side note, there are many different ways to make granny squares. Some people like to start their rounds differently. Some people like to flip. I've had questions about this. They work theirs by working one round and then flipping it back and so forth, so that it's, some people find that it lays flatter. So if you have a special way that you prefer to make a granny square that's a little different than mine, please feel free to do that. So let's continue. We did chain 2 to do our corner, and then we're going to work 3 double crochet in that same corner space. So 1, 2, and 3. All right, coming down the side, chain 1. Now in that next space, work 3 double crochet. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1, and then in the next space, work 3 double crochet. 1, 2, and 3. All right, chain 1, and now we're at the next corner. So 3 double crochet. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 2 because it's a corner, and 3 double crochet in that same corner space. 1, 2, and 3. All right, coming down the next side, chain 1 and work 3 double crochet in that next space. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1. Next corner space. Once again, 3 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, and chain 1. All right, here's our last corner. So we're going to work 3 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, chain 2. And in the same corner space, work 3 double crochet. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1, and now the next space, work a side. So 3 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, chain 1. Next space, 3 double crochet. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1, and now we're going to join to close, same way we've been doing. 3 chains up, join with a slip stitch to close the round. Okay, we did rounds 1 through 4, and our first square of our throw is complete. It looks great. And so this week, we're just going to focus on that first square. Now, if you want to move ahead, if you've done granny squares before, you can go ahead and make the other squares with some of these other colors that we have. But I just wanted to let you know, because we're doing the join as you go, it's a nice, easy way to join our squares, and it looks beautiful. If you're going to move ahead and make some squares for next week, just do rounds 1 through 3, because round 4 for our other squares, not this one included, the first one we make in its entirety, but for the other squares we'll be doing, we're going to do the join as you go round on round 4. So if you make a couple more squares up to round 3, but just as a side note, you may have to like cut the yarn and tie it on and do your 4th round that way. So it's totally up to you if you want to work ahead, if you've done the join as you go, if you are familiar with granny squares, feel free. This is a crochet along, but I do want to encourage all of you to go at your own pace. Some of you may be more familiar with granny squares. Some of you want to just do it every step of the way with me, and that's wonderful. I love it. So what we're going to do for this square, this square number 1, is we're going to cut the yarn now. We're going to grab our hook and we're going to fasten off. And this tail we will weave in as we go along when we start adding more squares. You can also take this center, remember this tail we held as we went along? Flip your square over to the back and pull it nice and tight, and you can snip that end right now so it's not in the way. I like to snip them as I go. It keeps everything nice and neat. So our week 2, the first granny square tutorial is complete. We went through it every step of the way. So moving on and looking ahead to next week for week 3, we're going to start focusing on the other granny squares, the join as you go granny squares. So next week, grab your hook and your other colors, and we're going to also kind of map out our colors a little bit so that we don't have 2 purples side by side. We're going to kind of spread out and move the colors around so that it you know, it makes a very pleasing look with all the colors and nothing, there's no like blobs of color on our blanket, if you will. So join me next week and we will start making the additional granny squares for our throw. As always, be sure and use the hashtag FiberFluxCal. You can see it above, and I will see you next week. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure and click the subscribe button to get all the latest FiberFlux video updates. Thanks again.